Hello, my name is Chitta and I am one of Bante's students. We realised recently that if people wanted to make donations to Bante, it wasn't necessarily very easy. It doesn't have a fixed address and therefore a fixed donation box. So we've added a link below if anybody does feel like they want to offer some dana in any way. Obviously it's going to a wonderful cause. It's supporting the sasana and helping support the translation of all the suttas and the recitation of the suttas. So if you feel that way inclined, then please do click on the link below and support this wonderful monk. Thank you. May you be well.
This week we continue on our sutta exploration series, and for this week, which is week number 107 in our sutta explorations, I wanted us to go back to the Anguttara Nikaya, the numerical discourses, and specifically to the Book of the Tens, the Dasaka Nipata. And I wanted to have us look at what Lord Buddha had to say about how to overcome fear. Something that the world, we human beings especially, more than any other species of animals or other beings residing on this planet, in this planet, are very susceptible to experiencing and are experiencing in this time period. Fear has always been there. Even the devas have fear, let alone all beings who are on the lower levels of existence compared to them. But especially to try to see what Lord Buddha had to say to encourage practitioners in this Dhamma and discipline as to what can we do, what can a practitioner do to overcome this normal experience of dis-ease, of discomfort, of pain, of suffering. Now, of course, when I mentioned where I use the word normal, that doesn't mean that it is to be entertained or welcomed or invited even, because sometimes that's what happens in some cases with some people or in the culture, where fear can be induced, or fear-mongering, as they say. That's not normal. That's not natural. There are natural states of fear, of course, given a difficult or dangerous situation. That's a normal self-preservation mechanism that needs to be kicking in, given an unnatural state of affairs, such as a wild animal, vicious, let's say, you're in an animal like that's coming after you, let's say, or you're hanging from a precipice, literally, you're about to fall, or you're walking by a precipice, by a cliff that has a several kilometers drop. So fear there is protective, even. But what do we do when outside situations, circumstances that are stress-inducing can come to overwhelm the mind? Now, sometimes they are externally originated, like the examples I just gave, and sometimes they are internally occurring. Sometimes they are naturally internally occurring. Sometimes they are unnaturally internally occurring. The differences here might seem subtle, but they are very impactful as far as the weight that they have upon the mind, upon the person, upon the experiencer. Internally or naturally internally occurring could be something like the body failing or nearing its end. When it becomes extremely obvious that, I think I'm going to be fooling myself if I were to think that I have another year to live or 10 months to live. Because you notice the body is becoming more and more frail. That's internally occurring, which is also natural because everything is anicca based, everything that is conditioned. Now, the unnatural internally occurring could be something like how the fear mongering that's coming in from the outside, some things that you might have heard or seen can induce in you. So you start pondering, ruminating over it in your mind. So you start to do a lot of what ifs. If this happens and then that happens and then this will happen and then, oh my, I'm going to be in a terrible state. So that's internally, so you're thinking about it. This is one of the major problems for meditators. This is where papanchas dominate. They rule. These mental proliferations that we entertain. That's why as we go deeper in our practice, vitakka, vichara have to be silenced. Vitakka is the thinking. Vichara is the constantly pondering and planning and trying to hold a mental position towards this thing that could be happening or would be happening. So you start shadowboxing in your mind. But when you look at the common denominator in all this, you see that there is this position holding towards this inevitable fear, or fear as such. So this creates a sense of agitation, restlessness, which is the opposite of what we want in this practice. Because anything that agitates the mind, yesterday I gave a brief talk on this in the form of a Q&A, but here it's extremely important to pause and look at the role of mental activity that's going on in response to some instigating factor, something that you might have heard or read, let's say. There might be a news, item, and let's say the news might say, "Oh, the government is going to have or the company is going to fire this many people." There's a possibility of it. Already that's enough of a reason for you to lose sleep, especially if you have so many responsibilities, mouths to feed. So you lose sleep. You're becoming dislodged. This is also a fear. So what then is necessary is how to have a healthy response to such things. The Dhamma doesn't teach us to go ahead and put ourselves or lock ourselves in a box, a lead box, completely immune from the world around us and pretend that nothing's happening. That's not the Dhamma. That's something else. That is probably positive thinking, this and that, and it's like completely, in essence, irrational because you are not living life fully. But then what do? if that's not the way. The Dhamma teaches us to see the things that are happening, but then to be fair with the reality. With the reality that is happening on the outside, the inevitability of it, and then to respond to that with the reality that has been and is taking place within us without being shaken up. The Dhamma is also safety. Mahamangala Sutta, what is that Mangala? The greatest of blessings, we say. Why? Or in the case of the Ratana Sutta, why is that used to create this sense of protection? Because the Dhamma is also giving us a sense of security. The security is not going to come from the Buddha outside of us, somewhere in a universe or a cosmos, or the power of arahants somewhere who are presiding over some heavenly realm to come down and somehow intercede and influence the situations around us. That is not the case. Or even the devas to come in and help us all the time. That's not the case either. So true safety and security come from within oneself. That's the core. That's the essence of it. That's why it is the person when you, in the mornings or anytime you're taking refuge, you're also taking refuge by, you are taking refuge on your own. You're the one who's bowing. You're the one who's on your knees. You're the one who's saying, I take refuge in the Buddha. I take refuge in the Dhamma. I take refuge in the Sangha. All three of them come and unite in you. They're coming from your heart. You are ultimately your own refuge, Lord Buddha says. Because you're the filter, you're the filtration system from which everything is going to pass through. So here we're going to see how Lord Buddha is advising one of his disciples, who happens to be a lay disciple, a famous one that we all have come across so many times. Because these are individuals who also were facing the difficulties that we are, or we have, or we will be in the future. Because we have a tendency of always thinking that such individuals were top, they were perfect. We forget that they were also like us. They had a body, they had to deal with suffering, they had to deal with old age and the inevitability of death, the loss of loved ones. So those things are not going to be not there, missing in a sense, because you have the Dhamma. No, they will be there, because so long as you are inhabiting a conditioned world, a conditioned body. So the Dhamma doesn't give us rose-colored glasses. That's what I meant by also not relying on positive thinking as such, as the all-in-all, cure. So this sutta comes from the Numerical Discourses, the Anguttara Nikaya, and it is from the Book of the Tens. It's sutta number 10.92. So AN, Anguttara Nikaya, 10.92. Bhaya Sutta. I translated it as Discourse on Fear, Bhaya, usually. Sometimes it's called, in English translations, I've seen it being used as terror, or danger even, in some cases. But in essence, we look at what these things are inducing, what these things are causing, and they're causing a sense of fear in you. The problem with fear is that before it happens, or if it ever was going to happen, we already create the after effect. If they were flammable, let's say, in nature, we've already scorched the whole forest. Well, the fire hasn't happened yet, but we've already scorched it. We've turned it into ash. That's how we are. And that is the power, the negative power of papanchas, specifically perceptions that we have. It's a powerful, powerful mechanism, tool, your mind. You give it one thing, but if it is not being restrained, disciplined enough to maintain control over what it does with the information provided to it, like that news article or something that you hear about. Oh, you know, they're going to be letting go of a lot of employees in this company. Well, wait a minute, what are you talking about? I just bought a house. I have this, I have 3 mouths to feed. I have my parents to take care of. Well, how am I going to do that? What do you mean? Like at this age, I have to go back and start writing a resume and apply for jobs? No. You just heard one single sentence, and from somebody who's dubious, but the mind just took off with that, grabbed hold of that, and turned that hearsay into not just a possibility, but turned it into absolute reality. So we do this, the mind is doing this on a consistent basis, and more so now than ever before. And that's another reason why I wanted to choose, I chose this sutta, because of its relevance for today, for a human being living today, and what the Dhamma has to provide, and what Lord Buddha says, what we can anchor ourselves upon in the face of fear-causing situations. Because I mentioned the internal, but there's also the external, the world that we've been living in for the past few years, 4 years now already, 4 or 5 years. There's so many questionable things that one after the other, they're happening, and it's almost like a crescendo. It's increasing, it's exponentially increasing. So the Dhamma, I believe firmly, is all about life as it's happening. It's contemporary also. That's why it is timeless, akaliko. So it doesn't hide from reality as it's happening, reality of the various sensations that we are undergoing, the influences that are coming in from the outside as well as the inside, what the inner world is doing, how we're thinking about the outside conditions. So, without further ado, let us begin. Bhaya Sutta, Discourse on Fear. Once the householder Anāthapiṇḍika approached the Blessed One, and after paying his respect, sat to one side, and the Blessed One spoke to him by saying, Householder, when the noble disciple has overcome 5 fear-causing dangers and threats, while also possessing the 4 factors of a stream winner, the one who has clearly and penetratingly seen with wisdom the noble pattern, then, if he so wishes, he could declare, I am done with rebirth into the hell realms, the animal realm, the realm of hungry and dejected ghosts. I am done with ever reappearing into states of misery and loss, and with any sort of birth in evil or horrible states. I am indeed a stream winner, and therefore I will never fall from that state, for I am now on my unmistakable and direct course, headed on the straight path to Nibbana Supreme. By the way, this is the lion's roar of a noble disciple. Someone who is declaring to oneself something that is undeniable. They know this for sure. with confidence that is unparalleled to anything else out there. So here, Lord Buddha is going to break down what he meant by the 5 fear-causing factors and threats, and the qualities that make one a stream winner. Stream winner is a sotapanna. So Anāthapiṇḍika was a noble, when we read so many countless suttas where it's saying to us how Lord Buddha is residing in Jetavana's Jeta's park at the monastery of Savatthi, donated by Anāthapiṇḍika. Here we have Anāthapiṇḍika. So Lord Buddha would never teach something in a misplaced manner, if you will. There's always a cause. And from the context, we can understand a few things about the mindset or the state of mind where the householder Anāthapiṇḍika was approaching from in coming and presenting to Lord Buddha on that particular day. So let's see what Lord Buddha has to say. And what are the 5 fears and threats they have to overcome, or they have overcome? Householder, whoever intentionally destroys, kills, or harms living beings, whether directly or indirectly, then because of that intentional action, they create for themselves the situations when they will have to face the consequences in the form of fears and threats that will come to them sooner or later, along with the mental, emotional, and physical suffering and pain they bring. So, this is why a person, we work to take, to train ourselves in the precepts, because there's an understanding that there will be consequences to come. So you avoid it. You're using common sense at the very least. But Lord Buddha adds, but when the person has abandoned the destruction and killing of living beings, then they eliminate for themselves any situations where they would have to face fears and threats. And in this manner, they release themselves from the mental, emotional, and physical suffering and pain such evil and unwholesome actions would have brought. Thus, the householder who refuses to harm or kill living beings protects those around him and himself too. This, in turn, extinguishes any fears or threats connected to the destruction of life. In the 80s, they were making a lot of movies. Hollywood was making a lot of movies about end of days, I guess they're still making them, I'm presuming, and what people will do. We saw this with the whole BLM thing and Antifa and whatever it was, I lost track, where people were behaving in deranged manner, basically. They were robbing, stealing, and it was chaos, at least in America. And when I was a kid growing up in the 80s, I would think, what would happen if there would be like something like that happening? And mind you, we were living in 17-year war, constant war, 365.5 days per year times 17. So we were living through trauma. But I would think, would I find myself killing someone in such a chaos? I would say to myself, I was like 12, 13 when these movies would be coming out. And I was like, wait a minute, would I do that? That's a question we need to ask. So here, Lord Buddha is saying such a person who has secured oneself in the understanding of not breaking precept, even if you're exposing him or her to hunger, states of deprivation when it comes to resources, they are not going to go outside and kill that animal, especially when we're dealing with the sotapanna. They're not going to look at their cat or dog and say, Bobby, you've been with me for all these years, but sorry, we're going to make you lunch. That's not going to happen for such a person. They say, if we're going to die, then we're going to die. But we're going to make sure that, we will look at all the resources available. But as far as killing another person, destroying the life of another person, that is out of the question. I might have mentioned some years ago, there was a documentary being shot when I was living as a layman at the time, and they asked me to take part in this documentary, and apparently other Buddhist individuals or teachers had been interviewed, and so I was merely a Dhamma teacher, a lay Dhamma teacher, and somebody had seen one of the recordings that I had done on trauma and the Buddhist perspective and how we can use. So little did I know that the person was promoting veganism and seeing Buddhism as purely vegan, or at the very least vegetarian. And I had to explain to them that that's not the case. But they didn't like that. But anyhow, the whole thing turned around when I said, wait a minute. There's a difference between a true practitioner of the Dhamma, of Lord Buddha, and a vegan or anyone out there who thinks that by merely having a certain diet, that's going to make them pure, or somehow help the world, help the planet, help nature, help existence. And that is, the vegan will go outside and still kill another being, chances are. But a person, a noble disciple, will never do that. They will die of hunger. There's a huge difference. There's a huge difference. Because there isn't that violence within the heart of the Sotapanna. So no matter what happens, they will never even entertain. I've asked this I had a vegan friend once who would love to argue with me on these things. And I said, listen, how would Lord Buddha, he would say, how would Lord Buddha eat meat if he was so holy? And I said, your diet will never save you. No cow has ever become an arhat. No elephant has become an arhat. So your diet choice is not going to purify you. It's what's in your heart that purifies you and how you live your life. And I would just get a kick out of the fact that when he would try to push me from different angles, and I would say, listen, let's say there's no more food left. And he had a dog and a cat. And I say, you have your wife, you have your daughter, and you have you. You who think that everyone who eats meat is a bad person. It cannot be a spiritual person. I said, okay, let's say tomorrow there's the supermarkets, Trader Joe's of the world, Costco's of the world, all the, Miracle veggie meat or meatless burger places are all shut down. There's no soy product, nothing left. But there's some animals, there's your cat and dog. What would you do? Would you would you kill them? Well, that's a different case. That's never going to happen. And I said, that's not answering my question. Would you do it? Well, if it comes to that, we'll have to make a choice. Like, well, what if you're that dog? You're becoming food now to your once vegan owner. What is that thing then? So this is, again, not about veganism, but it is about the intense blindness that we have in thinking that violence can only be coming from a certain place when it's directed from a place that's obviously different than my lifestyle choices, something as superficial as one's diet. It is superficial. And Lord Buddha is talking about the mental state of a noble disciple here, specifically Anāthapiṇḍika, because Anāthapiṇḍika is now being told that no matter what happens to you, the situations, Anāthapiṇḍika, would you ever even entertain the possibility that you would one day kill another being? And of course, we know the answer to that. It's a no. He says, already you see that. That is your source of refuge. Remember earlier I was talking about your safety and security? That is it, because you know you will never break that precept. That's something that even the greatest of generals, admirals in the most powerful armies ever in human history could ever rely upon. That level of certainty is craved by so many because it's such a secure state to be in, because you know you're set. And Lord Buddha starts with the first precept, of course. Now he goes to the next one. Next householder, whoever intentionally steals from another or takes what is not freely given, whether directly or indirectly, then because of that intentional action, they create for themselves the situations where they will have to face consequences in the form of fears and threats that will come to them sooner or later, along with the mental, emotional, and physical suffering and pain they bring. But when the person has abandoned stealing or taking what is not given, then they eliminate for themselves any situations where they would have to face fears and threats, thus releasing themselves from the mental, emotional, and physical suffering and pain such evil and unwholesome actions would have brought. So the consequences they are very much alert to. If I do this, then this will happen. So the person is also aware of conditionality, which we were talking about briefly last week. Paticca samuppada, the conditionality, the causality. If this is here, then this will happen. That basic, commonsensical, logical, rational way of things unfolding. So the person is not lying to themselves. No, I'm going to be the exception. If I steal from you, then and there's no cameras, no one saw it, and hey, I justified it. It was justifiable. You were asking for it, so I took it, and I needed it, and you had extra, so everything's fine. No, that's not how it works. Because here the person understands that I took something from someone means the same impact will occur to me, and I will have to deal with the consequences of that. And it's not going to be pleasant. Thus, the householder who refuses to steal or take what is not given protects those around him and himself too. This in turn extinguishes any fears or threats connected to stealing or to taking what is not given. This is the essence of what we mean by anybody who keeps the precepts, practices sila, practices virtue, becomes a source of protection. I was last week in a taxi, and the driver, who happened to be from an immigrant from India, he didn't know anything about Buddhism, and he looked at me and he said, "Oh, what?" I told him I'm a Buddhist monk. And he's like, "Do you wear those robes all the time? Is that your clothing?" I said, "Yes." So he wanted to know more. He was really genuinely curious. Excuse me. And it was a long ride, so he kept on asking series of questions. And obviously, it came to precepts, specifically the stealing, harming, sexual, in our case, as bhikkhus, complete celibacy. He didn't understand that. So I had to give him examples. And I said, if you leave your mobile phone, if you leave your wallet, if you leave your wife at a table, and I happen to be there, and for some reason you forget your wallet and you leave, you forget your phone and you leave, and let's say you have the most beautiful woman in the whatever universe, and she's there, and there's nobody else, and you somehow forget her, and you go, and et cetera, or there's alcohol or something like that. But especially with, let's say, your phone or your money wallet, you come back and you find every single dime or money in the wallet intact. You will find your phone intact. You will find your wife over there, and I'm on the other side of the building, but your wife will be completely intact over there. And I said, how would you feel? He looked at me and said, good. Would that make you safe? I said. He said, yes. I said, that's the life we live. That's what Lord Buddha taught us. And he looked at me and he with that, are there such people on the planet? With that stunned look. And he's driving and he's reaching over. I thought he's like changing your seatbelt or something. I wasn't sure what he was doing, and he got a call, he didn't pick up. So there's a lot of things he's doing. Meanwhile, we get to our destination and he stops the car, of course, and he reaches over and he gets some coins from his pocket and he turns around and he hands them to me. And because I had mentioned to him, because like he asked, how do you live? And I said, I live by the donation of all those people who feel I deserve support, or anybody who lives this kind of life deserves to be supported, because I don't make money. Because I told them I've written books and this and that, and I provide teachings. So he reached over and got some coins and he gave to me and he said, I would like to give you this. I was so moved because of that beautiful moment of dana. And I said, please, before I accept, I held his hand on top of, and I just held on the bottom. I said, please, both hands. The car had stopped. So he's turned sideways in his seat towards the back where I am. And I said, please have your parents in mind. Please have all your loved ones and have them also join in this beautiful act of generosity. And he smiled and I said, close your eyes for a moment and just imagine. He did, and he was happy. And I said, I accept. It was a beautiful moment. But the thing that was impactful, his stunned look when I said, you leave your phone or your wallet and you leave and you come back and it's still there. It was like, because people don't do that these days, apparently. Especially when it was his wife or something, who's protected. That's it, protection. And that's one of the best ways to save this planet. People have lost their trust in each other. I remember I've been in places in the last 4 or 5 years, where even a cough was triggering people. People will literally get up and leave the room if somebody coughed, or at least give them some nasty looks as if the person has, I don't know, and they would be their loved one. Where's the sense of protection there? That's vile, that's vulgar, that's mean. There's nothing Buddhist about that. And I've said in different ways to Buddhist listeners in different places I've been, as I'm giving Dhamma talks, people are very much extremely hyper sensitive, hyper focused on, is he sick? Is he going to be sick? Is he going to make me sick? Am I going to die? Meanwhile, they're like in their 80s. They've lived their whole entire life. And they're Buddhist. A few times I asked people when I was in Asia, you're all Buddhist, right? You do know this thing about anicca, right? You do know about samsara, right? So what are you protecting with 3 layers of masks, sitting 300 meters apart from each other, freaking out if somebody sneezes by accident, bodily reaction, normal, coughing, normal. Where is the sense of safety? There isn't. So it's just a matter of superficiality then when we are at that moment. If that's our mindset, it's just fake when you're taking precepts. People in the middle of COVID, they were actually emailing me from around the world, specifically Sri Lanka and Thailand. Oh yes, Thailand. People who went to ordain in Thailand in monasteries, they were turned away by Buddhist monastics, by Buddhist monks, abbots. Some of them actually Western Buddhist Thai forest monks who were turning them away and saying, sorry, you can't come in. You have to get this thing done. You have to get this thing done. You have nothing to do with the Vinaya. Nothing to do with the Vinaya. Where you have a human being who doesn't have any symptoms, by the way. They've done all the tests and this and that, but they just want to go forth. They were turned away. Well, where's the sense of safety there? So there's a lot of hypocrisy. This is not one of them where Lord Buddha is talking to a layperson who's a true practitioner. So many of us today are not true practitioners, robes or not robes involved. So make sure you are a true practitioner, asking yourself these questions. If the push comes to shove, as the saying goes, will I go outside and slaughter an animal to feed myself? Because, hey, if you're in survival, mode, it's justifiable in society. Every religion says that, ultimately, except for Buddhism. Specifically when we're talking about noble disciples. So that is a great source of comfort, of ease, of safety. Being on a safe shore in a world that's presented to you as being nothing other than fearful. So here already you're creating your oasis of protection through your sila. So virtue is not simply to be feeling good and look good to others. But there's a deeper, more powerful, more significant role that virtue plays in purifying the very essence of you. And while at the same time protecting you and the environment, the people and other beings around you. Householder, this is the third one, whoever intentionally engages in any kind of sexual misconduct, whether directly or indirectly, then because of that intentional action, they create for themselves the situations where they will have to face consequences in the form of fears and threats that will come to them sooner or later, along with the mental, emotional, and physical suffering and pain they bring. But when the person has abandoned engaging in sexual misconduct, then they eliminate for themselves any situations where they would have to face fears and threats, thus releasing themselves from the mental, emotional, and physical suffering and pain such evil and unwholesome actions would have brought. Thus, the householder who refuses to engage in sexual misconduct protects those around him and himself too. This, in turn, extinguishes any fears or threats connected to engaging in sexual misconduct. Because any possible ramifications involved with that action of, let's say, cheating or causing someone else's partner to cheat, thanks to you, all those ramifications, all those strings that you would have been attached to are gone. They're not even a question anymore. They're done. You're not involved with any of it. You severed that possibility. And this is another reason why, he was talking not to a bhikkhu, of course. Lord Buddha was addressing a householder, Anāthapiṇḍika. He would engage in sexual activities, of course, but he was still a noble disciple. He could not engage in sexual misconduct But if we look at, in the case of a bhikkhu, for example, which would be absolute celibacy in the case of a bhikkhu or a monastic, then you would see how the complete relinquishment of anything to do with that activity protects you from any kind of hearsay, talk, gossip, or dangerous situations. By simply avoiding certain environments, avoiding being in a certain place at a certain time. I was mentioning to someone, not a Buddhist person, I think it was last week also, how we avoid, as monastics, we avoid being out and about at night. Oh, there's activities at night, there's not, the whole town comes alive. And I said, well, good for you, but I'm not interested because that's not what we do. It's like, why? Because a lot of things happen at night. A lot of craziness happens at night. Not just at night, of course, but we're talking about nighttime. But situations to be avoided are also highly protective. So if you're a person who goes out and hangs out with individuals who have a propensity towards or put you in harm's way, you need to be able to detect that. Now, also, this happens to be specifically for householders, what I'm saying. Sometimes we don't have the best of companions or friends or acquaintances. Sometimes we feel coerced into going and being in a place, some event that we didn't feel so great about to going, but we felt compelled to go, and we did. That's never a good thing, because sooner or later you're going to realize or ask yourself, what am I doing here with these people that are living or working on a different level, different wavelength? So Lord Buddha always encourages us, in fact, instructs us to look for the level of sila within the heart of the individual whom I'm calling my companion or friend or associate. Before you call a person, oh, you know what, I like her or I like him, he's a nice person to be around. Put all that nicety aside and ask this more important, pertinent question. How is this person's sila? Because if this person breaks sila, even if they don't take any sila, but they will be breaking your sila. They will be putting you in harm's way. Why? Because you're wanting to be there with them in their presence. So if this person harms another, if this person uses harsh speech or yells or lies or speaks untruth or engages in some type of sexual misconduct, you're already in harm's way. What are you doing there? Lord Buddha would ask. Whatever outcome that will be occurring as a result of you being there, in essence, it's all on you. Why did you put yourself out there? It's just like that delicious, ripe fruit that you take and you put it in a box of other fruits that are spoiled. You cannot tell yourself, well, I'm confident of my purity, of my precepts. Yeah, I'm I'm shielded, very well protected. That's why I'm going and hanging out with these people who have a tendency of getting drunk. Or they cheat on their spouses. Or they tell dirty jokes. Or they do drugs. Or they promote people who do drugs. That's already a no-no. Get out of there and say goodbye to those friendships, because your companions say everything about you. Mangala Sutta, the first verse, is all about that, the companionship. To know how to avoid fools is already the great mangala, is a great blessing all on its own, just to simply avoid them like the plague. 7-foot pole, right? There's that phrase, avoid them. My parents would say, avoid them, like walk away from them by 7 blocks, like avoid them. Such characters, never associate with such characters. Just don't cave into old propensities of saying, well, you know, we had a lovely past together. He's a nice guy. I mean, come on. Yeah, so what? He just does this. No, it's contrary. I've lived many years telling myself such things while associating with individuals who were nice people, in essence. But they were breaking sila, at least one. Then I had to deal with myself during and after, like, why did I sit through that? I was protected, you know, but why did I expose myself to that? Why? You don't have to, you know, this is your life. If you don't hold up your standards, they won't either. The world will not come in and defend your standards, ever, if you're not respecting them, your standards, that is. Householder, whoever intentionally lies or speaks falsely or engages in dishonest behavior, whether directly or indirectly, then because of that intentional action, they create for themselves the situations where they will have to face consequences in the form of fears and threats that will come to them sooner or later, along with the mental, emotional, and physical suffering and pain they bring. But when the person has abandoned lies or speaking falsely or engaging in dishonest behavior, then they eliminate for themselves any situations where they would have to face fears and threats, thus releasing themselves from the mental, emotional, and physical suffering and pain such evil and unwholesome actions would have brought. So you're eliminating such possibilities for yourself. Lord Buddha is saying it again and again. Thus, the householder who refuses to lie or speak falsely or engage in dishonest behavior protects those around him and himself too. This in turn extinguishes any fears or threats connected to speaking falsely or engaging in dishonest behavior. Who was it? I think it was Mark Twain who said, the great thing about the truth is that you never have to remember anything. I love that. You don't have to remember. What did I say yesterday to this question? How did I say it? How can I deliver it again the same way? I know I'm missing something. It never occurs. Elsewhere, I've heard it said, it's clean. It cuts clean, the truth. It's beautiful. It's like laser. It is what it is. Householder, this is number 5. Whoever intentionally, whether directly or indirectly, consumes any intoxicating substances, be it wine or liquor, or any kinds of substances that delude and hallucinate the mind, resulting in heedlessness, then, because of that intentional action, they create for themselves the situations where they will have to face consequences in the form of fears and threats that will come to them sooner or later, along with the mental, emotional, and physical suffering and pain they bring. But when the person has abandoned the taking of any intoxicating substances, be it wine or liquor, or any kind of substances that delude and hallucinate the mind, resulting in heedlessness, then they eliminate for themselves any situations where they would have to face fears and threats, thus releasing themselves from the mental, emotional, and physical suffering and pain such evil and unwholesome actions would have brought. Thus, the householder who refuses to consume any intoxicating substances, be it wine or liquor, or any kind of substances that delude and hallucinate the mind, resulting in heedlessness, protects those around him and himself too. This in turn extinguishes any fears or threats connected to the consumption of intoxicating and mind-altering substances. You know, people are strange oftentimes because we always like to have some type of engagement with some activity, something that removes you from reality as it's happening. But we look for how much of it is allowed, emphasis on how much of it is allowed in this case. I've had monks, to this day, you go to places like, in Sri Lanka or even in Sri Lankan temples around the world, they advocate for betel nut or cigarette smoking. I've had Western monks avoid the conversation or defend the smoking of cigars, even cigarettes, pipes. You go to Thailand, you see this a lot. They even justify it by saying, well, this arahant used to smoke packs of cigarettes. Well, I don't, because I know it's bad. It's disgusting to even imagine a child smoking a cigarette. What feeling comes up? What emotion comes up in you when you see a newborn or an infant smoking a cigarette? What does that do to you? And if it doesn't do anything, imagine Lord Buddha. Would you imagine Lord Buddha smoking a cigar? Could that even be possible? But if it was not possible for Lord Buddha, then why am I doing it? And how dare I protect that activity? Even people who've well-known Western monks who wrote books on Vinaya, they protect that. They say, no, that's different because it's not listed in the Vinaya rules. Because people were not as idiots as we are today in those days. I'm sure if there were somebody who came up with, nicotine, or it's not even the nicotine, it's the narcotics that they're putting inside the nicotine. I remember in the 90s, they did it was revealed that a cigarette has within it 27 or 37 different narcotics placed inside to keep people addicted. And the same thing with betel nut. Aside from the fact that the gums start to bleed and recede to the point where the teeth fall out. I once seen a very, very famous Thai forest monk, Ajahn, old. While giving a Dhamma talk, he's chewing on betel nut and then he's spitting it out in his spittoon, as if that's not disgusting enough. Things fall out, one of them being a tooth. Imagine Lord Buddha doing something like that. The mind has a difficulty to conjure up the images, the necessary zeros and ones to put those images together, because it's absolutely impossible. But we make such things possible and justify them. Why do I say this? Because just before I wanted to speak on this a few years ago, I looked it up. And lo and behold, betel nut has narcotics in it. That's another reason why you remain skinny. You lose appetite. Not just that, you lose other things as well. And the mind becomes agitated. So what do? Well, we don't want to make the mind agitated. But it reduces stress for some people, anxiety for some people. It allows you to release the tension or the stress level, takes the edge off. But if Lord Buddha was sitting next to you or in front of you, would you look at that and Would you be able to continue that action or that activity? And if you can't, okay, what would you do instead? What would you resort to within yourself to have the capacity to not do that? Because you must have tapped into something that enabled you to not resort to altering the state of mind, because that's what it is. You're altering the state of mind through such means. Now, today, you have even jhana, so-called jhana teachers, meditation teachers, who are advocating for taking of hallucinogenic drugs. They're saying, oh, it's going to expand your mind, this and that. In the suttas, it's very clear. Lord Buddha says, anything that deludes the mind, anything that deludes the mind, you're hallucinating, you're creating a reality, pseudo-reality that is not there. If you stretch it, if you look at it, every single one of the precept breaking activities, any single one of the akusala kammas, if you probe, if you zoom in to that moment, millisecond of that activity, there's a certain high you get. They've asked in interviews of people who've committed crimes, anything from petty thieves to actual criminals, to individuals who cheat on their loved ones. And when you look, you carefully look, you see that they get, the term vernacular is like, they get off on this, they get excited, they get the risque factor or the risk factor, that they're walking on the edge of a sharp, sharp sword of possibilities. They could crush and destroy their reputation. That itself, although it's quite dreadful if it were to happen, but if I can get away with this, stealing of this, that gives you a certain high. That is an unnatural state. That's a totally on the opposite pole of Nibbana. That's on the opposite pole of Dhamma. So let us not fool ourselves. The mind is very sneaky. So even though we might be carrying the banner of the Dhamma, even if we might be practicing 8 or 10 sila precepts, we have to check and recheck our position, our motives constantly, and our behaviors. And to check with what? To check with what Lord Buddha said, and not cherry pick, because I see this a lot. We're cherry picking. And earlier I was giving you the example of some bhikkhus who've altered, they have their own versions of what Lord Buddha said. Like I gave you the example of the smoking part. There's another one where there's some monks who say, oh, we don't touch money, we don't touch gold and silver, we don't touch gold and silver, we don't touch money. Well, how did you get this opulent monastery, my friend? How do you survive? And what is that you're carrying in your bag, Bhikkhu bag? Isn't that a credit card under your name? Well, I don't touch cash. But what was that was handed to you earlier? Hundreds of envelopes. What was inside those? Checks. Oh, but that doesn't count. It's not gold. What? I actually had to double check, double read that reference in the Vinaya books that some of these people have been writing. The logic, or the absence of logic, the delusion. It's money. People don't understand that whatever we carry from our Judeo-Christian, that fundamentalist or very rudimentary understanding of virtue, we're carried that into the Dhamma by justifying what we feel should be the case. That's ego, that's delusion, that's ignorance, that's moha. So what we can do is to look good. We will tell people that we are practicing 227 rules, as it says in the Vinaya. But I can create my own new versions and still claim that I'm not taking gold and silver. Why? Because I don't actually accept gold and silver. So it's open for interpretation type of a thing, and it's not. So the same thing here with the hallucinogenics. Anything that intoxicates the mind. Remember, in one of the reasons, there were the Vajji monks. In the second, what perpetuated, what brought about the second council, where the bhikkhus had to come together to address a major problem, there were these monks, the Vajji monks they were called, that had come up with 10 amendments that needed to be done in order for, in the Vinaya, because they wanted, for example, to have a little bit of salt carried with them. Because the food they were getting, sometimes it was bland. They wanted to add more salt, and Lord Buddha did not have a rule for that. Well, basically, like to carry one. So they wanted to amend that. You have to eat it the way it is. That's how it was. But the reason why I'm bringing this up, the Vajjis, money was part of it, yes. They said, well, some portion of the money, because sometimes we're going to places where money is necessary, because we're going to villages or regions where there's no Buddhists. And we go and door to door, and nobody is opening the door to give us food, so we're starved. But if we have some money, we can, buy something. Now, of course, 1 out of 1,000,000 of those reasons might have been, okay, legitimate. But then you have a lot of bhikkhus who were eager to collect money because they would see the prestige and the respect that was coming. So if they could just get the approval of the Sangha, they would take off, and all of a sudden they're living in mansions, which in any way it did happen. But the thing I wanted to bring that example up for was there's a certain drink that you see this also in Sri Lanka, and you see this in India, especially. I saw it in Kerala when I was there. So they cut a coconut while it's still attached to its stem, and they cut it open, but they cover it up, and they put they put a hole in it, I think, and they have a separate container to allow the coconut to grow while it's also fermenting. It's it's not totally, I forgot the name of it. Anyhow, so they said we can drink it right before it becomes fully fermented. Look at the sneakiness. They wanted to drink not the coconut. Nobody had an issue with that. But they would like to have a quasi-fermented coconut. Why, though? Because it would give you a certain buzz. They were making this a big deal. They said, no, we would like that. How come it's against the rules? So we should have an amendment that allows us to. And the good bhikkhus, the arahants, who were pushing for, no, we have to have a second council to address these monks. And they did. And those monks were, in essence, recognized as being heretics. But guess what? They nevertheless ended up dividing the Sangha, because that was the whole point of the need to have a second council to protect the schism. But already there was a schism. There were so many branches of Buddhism or Dhamma at the time, or the schools of Sangha, that is. So anyhow, if you go around the world, even the most strictest of, even Ajahn Mahabua was touching gold. People don't want to talk about this. How did he get gold to give to the Thai government to protect, he got millions and millions of dollars donated at even in his I think funeral. He was collecting. There was money being collected, and those monies were delivered to the government or something like that. But before he died, he actually collected gold, and he touched him. He gave them. He received them. So you see, even in the strictest of so-called strictest of Vinaya schools of Buddhism, today in Theravada, we have these, to put a lighter term, anomalies, but they're not anomalies. They're breaking of precept, in essence. But we don't talk about these things. I met monks who were hiding. When I used to be their kappiya, I would smell cigar smoke coming. Like I would just, is there fire? Is there fire? So I would walk around, I would look around the balcony. And one time I saw one of those Mahatheras hiding in a corner like a mouse, smoking a cigar. I was like, why, really? Why? You're a grown man. You're a grown man in your late 60s, early 70s. Why are you doing that? And how does that fall into the Dhamma? Please explain that to me, because my head is too thick to understand, apparently. I must have missed something of the Dhamma, that you find it very compelling to do this. We have to address these matters. They're not outside of the Dhamma realm of concern. And then appropriately make the decision to alter our lifestyle. Because anything that is not Dhamma is adhamma. And anything that is adhamma is not fulfilling. It doesn't give you peace of mind. It will always be causing harm. Always, somewhere. So Dhamma is also confronting. It's confrontational to the ignorance that we've been holding. It's revealing, in essence, of whatever was hidden or dormant, laying dormant in us, that we would justify. And we all do this. We've all done this. But you have to be forgiving also of yourself. We're learning. This is a learning process. Being and going easy on yourself. But we have to be firm also to say what is right, what is wrong. Because if you go to India right now, you will find thousands, if not millions, of so-called sadhus or those who claim themselves to be ascetics or recluses, with their, dreadlocks and all that, walking naked, smoking marijuana, heaps of marijuana. I was surprised. I was like, where am I? In San Francisco or Venice Beach, California? What is this? I'm smelling marijuana. Walking in different parts of India, Varanasi, even parts of, Nepal and other places. What is this? Bodh Gaya. People are smoking and they think, oh, yes, this is part of our practice. Well, how? Where? How did you do the math for that one to work? Delusion has been rampant all throughout human history, including ours. Time for us to admit it. And what, householder, are the 4 factors of a stream winner that such a noble disciple possesses? Here, householder, the noble disciple possesses unshakable faith in his heart towards the Blessed One, knowing for certain that, so this is now specifically for a noble disciple, meaning someone who has seen with Dhamma Chakku, Dhamma eye, which the householder Anāthapiṇḍika had. So Lord Buddha is saying they possess, not must. If they're noble disciple, they already possess it. Unshakable faith in one's heart towards the Blessed One. Knowing for certain that the Blessed One is an arahant, perfectly awakened. He is supremely endowed with knowledge and conduct, the well-gone, the knower of the worlds, the incomparable tamer of those to be tamed, the teacher of gods and humans, the enlightened and blessed. That is what we chant. Iti piso bhagava arahan samma sambuddho vijjacharana sampanno sugato loka viduanuttaro purisadhamma sarati satta deva manusanam buddho bhagavati. And that is, whenever you're having, whether you're a noble disciple or not, if you could recall even one of these qualities in your mind, it centers you, it protects you. So when you're invaded by worries, fears, turmoil, whatever, you name it, if you could read it, or you could just remember part of it. Ajahn Mun would always encourage his students to practice Buddho. That's where it comes from. Buddho Bhagavati, for example. It's there. The Buddho. If you could just remember that from all the 9 qualities, that's still huge, because that's one of the anchors. It locks you in. And the more you practice that, the more it turns into unshakability in your heart. And because we have the quality of the Buddha, obviously, we're going to have the qualities of the Dhamma. Again, householder, the noble disciple possesses unshakable faith in his heart towards the Dhamma, knowing for certain that the Dhamma of the Blessed One is well expounded, realizable here and now. It is timeless, inviting direct examination. It unmistakably leads onwards. It is to be realized by the wise for themselves. Again, householder, the noble disciple possesses unshakable faith in his heart towards the Sangha of noble disciples, knowing for certain that the Sangha of the noble ones, noble disciples, has come to the good path, the straight path, the wise path, the path of mutual appreciation and understanding. They are the 4 pairs that comprise the 8 great beings, who are the true venerable ones, worthy of offerings and hospitality, the ones to be revered with clasped hands, the incomparable field of merit for the entire world. And this happens to be the Mahasangha, the noble qualities listed of these 8 individuals. 8 because they have their 4 categories of noble disciples, yes, Sotapanna, Sakadagami, Anagami, and Arahant, yes. But there's always, we have to understand them with the Magga and Phala divisions. One who is on the way to attaining the fruition stage of each of these, which we call the Magga, and the one who has attained to the fruition, which is the Phala stage of each. So that will make those 4 into 8. Again, householder, the noble disciple lives with virtue. And ultimately, by the way, Lord Buddha calls those the true Sangha. Those are the ones who are deserving of the offerings of individuals. Again, a householder, the noble disciple lives with virtue, possessing the virtuous heart that is so loved by the noble ones. For it is unbroken, flawless, spotless, impeccable, praised and recognized by the wise as leading to freedom, untouched by any kinds of corruptions. Thus he finds his heart softly and naturally gliding and landing into samādhi with ease. Why? Because there's no agitation. Isn't that the most beautiful quality of protection? Where your mind is completely safe. Why do we feel unsafe? Because we get agitated. So you have to reach out for this or that thing to give you that semblance of safety, so you do not become agitated and restless. So that is why we're practicing. We're not running away from anything. We're standing our ground. We're facing the waves, powerful waves coming at us when we can't avoid them. We've done our best to remove ourselves in it, but life will come. So you're not going to stick your hand in the ground and say, okay, I'm not seeing this, I'm not seeing this, I'm not seeing this. No. Because you're not afraid that you will lose your virtue. You're not afraid that you will become agitated. You're not afraid of yourself, basically. That you're going to lose it and become the old version of you, which you despise. No, there's a kindness in you. You become a mother to yourself. You've become a protective father to yourself. You care about yourself. You protect yourself. And that's why you're practicing sila. You're not practicing it for your teacher, even Lord Buddha, in fact, to gain freedom, which is a state of non-agitation, which is nirodha. These, therefore, are the 4 factors that such a noble disciple possesses, householder. In this manner, householder, when the noble disciple has overcome 5 fear-causing dangers and threats, while also possessing the 4 factors of a stream winner, then, if he so wishes to, he could declare, I am done with rebirth into the hell realms, the animal realm, the realm of hungry and dejected ghosts. I am done with ever reappearing into states of misery and loss, and with any sort of birth in evil or horrible states. I am indeed a stream winner, and therefore I will never fall from that state, for I am on my unmistakable and direct course, headed on the straight path to Nibbana Supreme. And what is the noble pattern, the correct measure that is to be seen and thoroughly penetrated with wisdom? Here, householder, the noble disciple spends his time reflecting on his experiences as he contemplates. When this is present, then this comes to be. When this arises, this also arises as a consequence. But when this is not present, this too does not come to be. And when this comes to an end and ceases, this also comes to an end and ceases. Hetu Pachaya, this the cause, the being causally related. In essence, the noble pattern, that's how I've translated this, is a reference to Paticca Samuppada. If we can just understand that. Earlier I was saying, if you're not perpetuating the status quo, and instead you're looking at the causal relations, then there's a chance for wisdom to arise. Because you're being honest, you're being truthful, you're being very clear as to what's really happening. You're not sugarcoating anything. Thus, he comes to understand, in the presence of ignorance as their condition, habitual drives arise, sankharas. In the presence of habitual drives as its condition, consciousness or sense awareness arises. Sankharas lead to consciousness. Those are the habitual drives that we get. Those are the things that are going to look at the thing that's happening, and they will attribute certain qualities. You can look at consciousness as such, or sense awareness. Because otherwise, before that happens, it's just an object and the organ that's looking at that. But the sankhara comes in to paint it, because that has been the modus operandi for countless eons. And that's how the brain worked. That's how the mind worked. That's how you had a relationship with the thing that you're seeing and the eye that's seeing. All of a sudden, that had a certain signature to it. So they are related. In the presence of sense awareness or consciousness as their condition, mentality and materiality arise, or name and form arise. In the presence of name and form as their condition, the 6 sense spheres arise. In the presence of the 6 sense spheres as its condition, contact arises. Because of these 6 doors of the eyes, the nose, the ears, the tongue, the body, the mind. All of a sudden, we are ready to make contact with the world. Why? Because we already had the consciousness there. We recognized it as a separate consciousness. There needs to be that recognition, but before recognition happens, there needs to be attention given to that consciousness. Otherwise, again, we would just be seeing mind and mind object. We wouldn't be seeing the thing, the memory, because it's not even recognized, because you're not giving any attention to it. And that's why when you're deep in meditation, the moment your drive or dedication to your object of meditation recedes, becomes less, suddenly those memories become a little bit more 3D. They become a little bit more compelling. You could see them better. And all of a sudden, you're pulled out of your meditation and dropped into smack dab into the center of those memories. And now those memories become alive. And then you catch yourself, where am I? What am I doing? Oh, I'm not on my object. And you go back. Well, how did you fall out? Because there was attention given to what no attention should be given. Why? Because of habitual patterns, habitual drives. You see the sankhara role there? So this is the reason why Lord Buddha gave so much emphasis to yoniso manasikara, right, wise, radical attention, placing the attention where it needs to be. Oh, excuse me. In the presence of contact as its condition, feeling arises. In the presence of feeling as its condition, craving arises. Already, when you have contact, you're stuck. You're going to have a painful feeling or a pleasurable feeling, but you're definitely going to have some type of a feeling. And already that feeling is telling you there's a relationship there. And that's why it's a burning feeling, if it is a painful one. Or it has this attractive quality. You're enmeshed in it if it's a pleasurable one. Already you're neck deep in it, as they say. In the presence of feeling as its condition, craving arises. In the presence of craving as its condition, grabbing arises, upadana. In the presence of grabbing as its condition, becoming arises. That's bhava. In the presence of becoming as its condition, rebirth arises. And in the presence of rebirth as their condition, aging and death, grieving, wailing, distress, torment, depression, and anguish arise. And thus, this whole accumulation of suffering arises. So there's no surprise anywhere, you see? So there's no reason for us to think, well, I don't know where this sadness came from. I don't know, I'm feeling depressed. Really? Let's sit down. Let's jot down. Let's do the map. How did, what happened before? What happened before? What happened before? But with the remainderless fading away and ending of ignorance comes the ending of habitual drives. And the ignorance is not going to fall out simply because ignorance is going to end thanks to you putting the energy to apply attention, to look, to sniff out the cause of this, sniff out the cause of that before it. Yes, initially it might seem tedious, but it's not. You develop the curiosity. Why do I feel like this? Why am I feeling like this? Why do I feel like this when this happens? Could there be something that I'm not noticing? That's the way to get rid of ignorance. Don't wait for nibbana to come in and all of a sudden there's going to be joy in your heart, or ignorance obliterated out of, it's not going to be like that. It takes effort. It's work. That's why those clowns go ahead and want to include psychedelic drugs. That's what they are. Mushrooms and things like that into meditation practice and call it, oh yes, this is part of the practice. Why? Because they don't like to do work. People don't like to do work, just like the body doesn't like to do work. When you see a fit person, they're doing work. They're watching their weight, they're watching what they eat, they're doing exercises, or an elderly person who's sharp in their mind. How are they doing that? Because they're thinking, they're learning new skills. They're learning new languages. It takes work. Otherwise, the body, the mind, the brain are lazy. That's why, initially at least, we need to put some effort. With the ending of habitual drives, sankharas, comes the ending of consciousness or sense awareness. Because you see just the mind and the mind object, period. You don't see a memory. It doesn't register. You don't recognize it. Why? Because you didn't put the attention on it. Oh, what is that idea? Because if you slow it down further and further and further and further, you see that there's a moment before it becomes a memory. And if you slow it down even further, you see that it was simply a mind object, a thing in the mind that the mind picked up, but it did not attribute to it the quality of a memory yet. For that to happen, it needed to give it attention. Then, very close behind it, follows the recognition. Oh, that's what you are. And all of a sudden, we have a memory. Now, that memory is going to make us flesh it out even more. Flesh it out even more. So it became consciousness now. All of a sudden, we have nama rupa now. Perception comes in and really starts to embellish it, colorize it. With the ending of nama rupa comes the ending of six sense spheres. With the ending of the six sense spheres comes the ending of contact. With the ending of contact comes the ending of feeling. With the ending of feeling comes the ending of craving. With the ending of craving comes the ending of grabbing. Tanha and upadana. With the ending of grabbing comes the ending of becoming. With the ending of becoming comes the ending of rebirth. I didn't like to use the word cessation of rebirth, cessation. I like the word ending here better. Because sometimes words, well, not sometimes, but we have become slaves to words, and we've attributed reality to words. That's another big detrimental factor in today's Dhamma practitioners in their development. That's why many people are stuck by using the word and the understanding, the intellectual understanding of a certain word as the thing that it is supposed to capture. Words can never capture the reality of what it is supposedly purporting to point at. This is big. People have to pause and really reevaluate their own understanding of the Dhamma. Many a time I notice people are looking at their, I'm not even getting to the comprehension, even that is failed. But the knowing of remembering or memorizing a term as equivalent to being it, being in that state, knowing that what that means, and then comprehending that term. We're still stuck in intellectual land. That can never be it. It's beyond intellect. It's experiential, it's visceral. So the mind, however, will come to persuade you that, yes, I know this term. Oh, therefore, then I am experiencing that which this purports to be. No. And that's why when you are faced with realities of life, all that goes out the window because it's just the intellect. Has nothing to do with it having been a reality, an experiential reality. That's why most people who practice the Dhamma, supposedly, the Dhamma of Lord Buddha, unfortunately, many are not practicing it. They're in love with their own ideas. They're in love with their own understanding or comprehension of those terms, words, terms, concepts at the most. The words can never capture the Dhamma, nor does intellectual comprehension of those words capture the Dhamma. It's impossible. Please understand that deeply. Work on that, absorb that. With the ending of rebirth comes the ending of aging and death, grieving, wailing, distress, torment, depression, and anguish. In this manner, this whole accumulation of suffering comes to an end and ceases. This is the noble pattern, the correct measure that is to be seen and thoroughly penetrated with wisdom. Therefore, householder, when the noble disciple has overcome the 5 fear-causing dangers and threats, while also possessing the 4 factors of a stream winner, the one who has clearly and penetratingly seen with wisdom the noble pattern, then if he wishes to, he could declare, I am done with rebirth into the hell realms, the animal realm, the realm of hungry and dejected ghosts. I am done with ever reappearing into states of misery and loss, and with any sort of birth in evil or horrible states. I am indeed a stream winner, and therefore I will never fall from that state, for I am on my unmistakable and direct course, headed on the straight path to Nibbana Supreme. Sad, sad, sad. When a noble disciple makes such a declaration, it's not empty and void. It's not wrongly declared. It's not for ego. It's not to separate oneself simply because of vanity or anything like that. They're coming from an experiential place of knowing deeply, of being it. That's why the person cannot behave in any other way except for the way of a noble disciple. Now, Lord Buddha is telling Anāthapiṇḍika that you see this also in different suttas, in the Samyutta Nikaya, also in Anāthapiṇḍika Samyuttas, where you have, I don't remember if it was Venerable Ananda or Venerable Sariputta or Lord Buddha, but they're encouraging Anāthapiṇḍika and others to remind themselves, hey, do you do this? Do you do that? No, you don't. You can't. Why? Because you've graduated to this level. So you need to acknowledge this. Sometimes we need to acknowledge ourselves, and that's not vanity. When you are a person who is no longer able to break a precept, please stop for a second, acknowledge that. If you have left behind a certain negative tendency of yours that you struggled with a lot, maybe it might have been miserliness, stinginess, or you used to get angry, or you used to get upset, or you didn't take care of your health. But now it's unthinkable for you to do that. Please pause, acknowledge that. You must. Because that's what you will be building upon. Because what the mind does is, because of all this stuff that's coming at you from the world, and you're living still in the world, so you're going to get layers of dust coming in and blocking your view as to what's really happening. So you need to brush the dust particles off, so you see what's what. I would ask both students and patients in my days of a therapist, when they would not see what's happening now. But I, as an observer, am seeing it because they're allowing me to see it, because of all the data they're giving me. And I would say, okay, would you, let's say, do the thing that you used to do 10 years ago? They would go, no. What happened? Why? Well, because of this, I can't do that. I can't see myself even though. Okay, let's stop there and acknowledge this. So in those suttas that I was mentioning, the Venerable Ananda or Venerable Sariputta would go and remind these individuals, especially Venerable Anāthapiṇḍika, the householder. There's no way you're going to be doing that or going through those realms. And then how's your faith? Have you broken any of your sila? All of a sudden, the heart rises, the mind calms down. There's a stillness. Akuppaceto vimutti, unshakability of the heart's release. Because Mara is working against us. This is the realm of Mara. The world is the realm of Mara. It's the world of agitation. So you need to work on protecting yourself constantly also. But it's a constant discovery. It's a constant adventure of discovery. It shouldn't be looked at as a chore, as, yeah, Bhante is saying so many things. Oh, we have to do this, we have to do that. Oh, boy, I have to work, 40 hours a week. On top of this. No, it's the attitude. You're creating ease, you're creating comfort, you're creating a beautiful outer lining of protection in all of the different episodes that you go through every week, every day. You're giving yourself breath of wisdom with everything you touch, with your mind, with your attitude, with your interactions. So, and that is one of the best ways that you can remove yourself from turning this into some type of dogma or some type of a tradition that you're just going through the motions or, the routines, and that's what we call Dhamma. No, that's not it. There's many religions out there. Go have your pick with one of them, but that's not going to be the Dhamma of Lord Buddha's. And that's also, unfortunately, sadly, what we have in most of the Dhamma that's being taught in the world today, because people are not going to the suttas the way they should be, and even more so, practicing what's in the suttas by leaving their egos outside and bringing the Dhamma inside. So bring the Dhamma inside. Bring the Dhamma into your life. I will pause here and see if there are any comments, questions. We just landed here yesterday, so less than 24 hours ago. So the body is quite tired, but this is, the Dhamma gives us energy. So if there are any questions, comments, please, I welcome. Otherwise, we can transfer some merits. Akasatha chabumata devanagamahiddhika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakantu lokasasanam. Akasatha chabumata devanagamahiddhika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakantu desanam. Akasatha chabumata devanagamahiddhika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakantu mamparanti. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. May you all be well. May you and your loved ones be protected. And may you be able to masterfully deal with fear without allowing it to even approach your doorstep. Feel the power in you, the power of your choice to distinguish between what is akusala from what is kusala. And like Lord Buddha said, he chose between the two bundles of thoughts he was having. He piled them first. This is before he became an arahant. He saw that he had two colors to his thoughts. One was unwholesome, useless, meaningless, waste of time, had nothing to do with the purpose of discovering the Dhamma, of attaining the Dhamma. So they were akusala. And then he saw that every time he would have a thought, sometimes those thoughts would be wholesome, kusala, geared towards the Dhamma. And he piled them into these two piles, therefore. And he said, from now on, I'm just going to discard the unwholesome one and just pick from the ones if I want to think. So every time you're making a choice and decision, ask yourself, which pile does this thing belong to? And choose from the one that is wholesome, kusala. And already you are protected from fear. Why? Because whatever's going to happen is going to happen anyhow, but you're not going to break your principle of living with kusala. Not on my watch, you're saying. And that is a tremendous position of power that no fear could withstand. So I will leave you with that and the blessings of the Triple Gem. Until next time. Sukhi Hota.